Let's head to Florida now. And in Mar-a-Lago, at a news conference, the president-elect Donald Trump said he would curb wind power and refuse to rule out the use of force in claiming the Panama Canal and Greenland. Trump also claimed he had saved NATO as he urged its members to increase spending.
If we don't pay our bill, and at that point it was 2%, it should be 5%. It should be 5%, not 2%. But at that point it was 2%. But many people didn't pay. Some people didn't pay anything. But many people were way, including Germany. Germany was at less than 1%. Well, I think NATO should have 5%, yeah. Well, you can't do it at 2%. I mean, at 2%, every country, if you're going to have a country in a regular military, you're at 4%. I think they should be, they're in dangerous territory. I think it should be, they can all afford it, but they should be at 5%, not 2%. If we don't pay our bill, and at that point it was 2%, it should be 5%.
Well, Trump also gave a stark warning to Hamas if the hostages in Gaza were not returned by the date of his inauguration.
If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. Can you elaborate? And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out. I don't have to say anymore, but that's what it is. And they should have given them back a long time. They should have never taken them. There should have never been the attack of October 7th. People forget that. But there was.
All right, Donald Trump there. Let's unpack it all with Niall Stanage, White House columnist at The Hill, who joins us now. Good evening, Niall.
Evening, Kate. How are you?
Very well. Let's talk about refusing to rule out military force to seize control of the Panama Canal and Greenland. Give us the context here. The Panama Canal, two kind of separate cases, we should say. These are not interlinked, really, are they, apart from Trump's desire to claim them, I suppose?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I suppose at a stretch, the linkage would be that his argument in both cases is that the United States has to be on alert for the expansion of foreign influence by its adversaries, which he means primarily China. And so there is, to be fair to him, a legitimate concern which he exaggerates in the case of the Panama Canal. He talks about things like Chinese soldiers patrolling it, which they are not, but there is Chinese influence in and around the Panama Canal, and of course it's an absolutely vital waterway. Greenland is a somewhat different case. I mean, it has been considered decades in the past to be of some strategic importance. Harry Truman, before our time, suggested that the US had some interest in sort of securing Greenland or something to that effect. But of course, right now it's an autonomous nation within the Kingdom of Denmark, and neither Denmark nor the Greenlanders seem overly eager to join the United States.
Surprise, surprise. Let's talk. We've not got a whole lot of time, but I do want to reference something else that's been going on for Donald Trump today, and this concerns the hush money case. He's lost his bid to delay sentencing due to take place on Friday. This is over the conviction that he has stemming from money paid to the porn star Stormy Daniels. He was hoping to get this one delayed, wasn't he?
He was, and he has not succeeded in doing so. He was convicted in this case on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. That conviction is seemingly going to stand. He can appeal after sentencing, but sentencing is going ahead. There is no realistic suggestion of him receiving a custodial sentence. However, it seems much more likely that there'll be a certain legal mechanism used which leaves the conviction on the books, but has no real punitive action taken.
Okay. What else do we need to be discussing? We've heard a lot from Donald Trump today, as I said in that press conference. Anything else jump out to you? He talked about Canada, didn't he, as well? Looking at what other... I mean, just, typical of Donald Trump. He said the Gulf of Mexico should be renamed to the Gulf of America. But here we have the man who will be inaugurated as president in just over 10 days' time, setting out, I guess, some of his agenda.
Yes, absolutely. And a reminder, really, of how chaotic things are likely to get in terms of the news agenda once he is fully back in power on January the 20th. I suppose one thing we could mention in passing, Kate, is that there were a number of instances during this news conference when he seemed to be complaining about President Biden continuing to take actions, for example, protecting a pretty wide expanse of US waters from offshore drilling. Trump seems to have an objection to that. I think he seems to regard it as obstructive of him, though, of course, at risk of stating the obvious, Joe Biden is the president and remains so until January the 20th.
And we also heard a newsline today about the classified documents case against him. And to that point, I'm just having a little look for the news alert here, but there's been an update on that, hasn't there? On the release of the documents, I think. I mean, essentially better news for Donald Trump. Judge Cannon has blocked the immediate release of special counsel report on Trump's classified documents investigation.
Yes, that's right. Judge Aileen Cannon is a somewhat controversial figure, not least because she was appointed by then President Trump during his first term and has issued a number of rulings that are considered fairly sympathetic to him, I would say. And this is another one to add to that catalogue. She is blocking, as you say, the release of Jack Smith, the special counsel's report into that matter in Florida. That obviously is a welcome result for Mr. Trump, a less welcome one for Mr. Smith, who in any event is wrapping out his work is done because he has been thwarted in effect by Trump's victory, after which Trump will retake control of the Department of Justice as well as all the other departments of government.
Niall, always great to speak to you. Thank you so much for discussing some of that with us. A fairly long and rambling news conference from Donald Trump, but certainly covered a lot of ground. There'll be some reporting up at thetimes.com very shortly on that if it's not there already. Niall Stanage, White House columnist at The Hill, thank you for being with us.
The Panama Canal was built for our military. I'm not going to commit to that now. It might be that you'll have to do something. Look, the Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. And we gave the Panama Canal to Panama. We didn't give it to China. And they've abused it. They've abused that gift. It should have never been made, by the way. Giving the Panama Canal is why Jimmy Carter lost the election, in my opinion, more so maybe than the hostages. The hostages were a big deal. But if you remember, and nobody wants to talk about the Panama Canal now because, it's inappropriate, I guess, but because it's a bad part of the Carter legacy. But he was a good man. Look, he was a good man. I knew him a little bit, and he was a very fine person. But that was a big mistake. Giving the Panama Canal to Panama was a very big mistake. We lost 38,000 people. It cost us the equivalent of $1 trillion, maybe more than that. Probably the most expensive. They say it was the most expensive structure, if we call it a structure, which I guess you can, ever built. And giving that away was a horrible thing. And I believe that's why Jimmy Carter lost the election, even more so than the hostages. Those two things.